Heads up, the energetics of psilocybin and herbal medicine, remembering and restoring the missing piece in contemporary psychedelic practice, is open soon. You can learn more at the link right here in the show notes. The doors open in March. We begin in March. This is a live 6-week group training program for space holders, guides, explorers, and just psychedelic enthusiasts. If you want to learn the missing pieces that maybe you haven't learned in other training programs around the energetics of psilocybin, the bridge to the human body, other various plant medicines and herbal allies, and learn about Grandma's Witchy Toolkit, which I can guarantee will help you immensely in your space holding and your own personal practice. I am so excited to finally be offering this after dreaming of doing this for years. Sam Perry is a very good friend of mine. He's an absolute genius and he's very enjoyable to learn from. We've made this program short and accessible and lots of fun, and I hope to see you soon. Just sign up at this link right here to learn more and be notified when the doors open. The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Well, let me ask, you mentioned something that you said was kind of missing from the psychedelic space. You and I have talked about this behind the scenes, how this space has just, exponentially grown over the last 5 years, 5-6 years. There's been just so many people coming in. There's a lot of new facilitators. There's a lot of people that have taken one training and then they're serving medicines, which, I don't actually have a problem with most people doing that, right? Like there's a lot of controversy out there over well, does someone who even holds space need to have their own experiences? A story came through recently about a psychedelic therapist had never had an ego death experience themselves. And I was like, well, I don't know. Who's to say what's right or wrong? I mean, it's a wild west out there. Mm-hmm. I'm very blessed to, thank God, work with really just masters for, my whole journey. But it is kind of a wild west. There's definitely a lot of stories that come across my email and my direct messages over the years that are concerning. A lot of people having what we would call negative experiences or unsafe experiences. And not because of abuse or anything, but because of genuinely they didn't feel safe, or they weren't held, or something happened, or they had just a bad experience or something, in their body. But what else do you think this training is teaching and covering that maybe, you mentioned it, by the way, a lot of these training programs they always start with the chemicals, okay, what's happening in the brain, how does this work? But yeah, what do you believe is kind of missing in this kind of this realm, especially in the culture of psychedelics?
The ancestors. Because the chemical model is brand new. I mean, dopamine was discovered in the 60s, the 1960s, in Montreal. And, some poor rat offering its body for that to be discovered. The whole serotonin effect, we call these plants serotonergic, right? Serotonergic means they work on serotonin pathways. And there's brilliant science. I love the science. And it's something I bring into the herbal school because I really want to teach herbalists the science, and I want to teach other people the herbalism. It's sort of this medicine. By the way, medicine was a word that we love, and here we are on the medicine podcast, right? The medicine means balancing. Everybody's getting ahead of themselves with the science. The science is brand new. And you know how you know it's new? Because the scientists are all coming to us, the weirdo hippies in the parking lot, and being like, hey, you got anything that could help? That's where we are. That's where we are. And the thing is, what's missing is the fact that you know how to do this. We all know how to do this. And we're looking for confirmation and experts in some brand new, very juvenile tradition, which is beautiful and powerful, like juveniles tend to be. But it doesn't have the wisdom of the tough old granny that's seen it 1,000 times and is still sitting in the rocking chair like, oh, yeah, that sucks, doesn't it? Right? That looks like a hard time, doesn't it? Well, in 100 years, no one will know the difference. And that's so. That's a hard thing to hear. I had a great teacher once who said to me, old age, gonna kick new age's ass. And I've always taken that. It's what's missing is the tradition. Mm-hmm. And that's coming to the surface in some of the real necessary kind of, let's pay attention to, are we stealing from people? But the most important thing, are we stealing something we see as valuable and not taking any of the rest? That's really the discouraging part. That's really the part that breaks hearts, is that we want your powerful drug, but we don't want any of your primitive stuff. We don't want any of your, it's just the implied bias, and it's not so implied, it's real. The way we work at that, the way we actually work at that, and that I can work it with this body, in this circumstance, is to offer what all of our cultures have, which is roots, which is the way that we've always held this. And it's the plants, and it's the understanding, the humility of the plants. How many people do we know? How many people have we all met who've gone on one of these experiences and had a journey, and then immediately they want to eat better? They want to have a garden. They want to connect with the natural world or take up an environmental cause, right? It's not an accident. It's the teaching of the plants. The plants are embodied in the world, in the living body of the earth. And so are we. And that's what happens, is that we awaken to that. It awakens in our very peculiar, specific bodies. One of the jobs I had, and it's funny because I really do feel like we come to this work and all of our different threads weave in. There's not a wasted moment in this life. There really isn't. We're always meditating if we are allowing that to be, and we're always learning. And so, a job that I took because I was writing poetry and looking for a place to kind of like be quiet for a while. And, I was living in New York City. I took a job to be a museum guard. And I worked for 5 years. For 5 years, I stood in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I stood there in a blue polyester suit, and it was fascinating because I got to just look at people. And I got to look at people encountering an absolutely inspiring object of art or a little token of history, all the various things that have been stolen and stuffed there, like all of the different cultures and treasures of the world, right? So I was in this position of basically being a fly on the wall, making sure no one licked the Van Goghs or whatever. But like, basically that's not that hard. You're just standing there. And I would do 12-hour day and then a 12-hour day and then an 8-hour day back to back. And then another 8 hour, just all I was doing was observing. And I've observed because I love people. I mentioned anthropology. I consider myself an anthropologist because I kind of apologize for us. I love us. I think humans are really cute and they're really interesting. And I love watching them encounter something that surprises them. And they all do it differently. We all are different, but we're all doing it together. And that's what's missing. It's missing when you start to say, everybody should have this experience. It changes lives. Well, no, but it changes specific lives in specific ways. And they're going to have to go back to those lives. And they might think like, we see this a lot, I can't bring this home. No one around me would understand this. Well, then bring something along that they could understand. Maybe they won't understand the big experience you had, fixing the flux capacitor on the Starship, but maybe they'll understand that you suddenly start to eat better and drink tea, and you're sharing that tea with them, and they're tasting that tea, and you're inviting them to sit outside with you, and you're inviting them to enjoy their human miracle, the body. That's what we can bring forward. It's currently not everywhere, not at all everywhere. There's so many people doing such great work. But as we're getting ahead of ourselves, sometimes it just becomes a self-improvement project. We got to improve the whole thing. We're doing it together. And it's a path. We're bringing this forward to our communities. The only reason I think anybody is interested in this stuff, if you really look, if you really ask, why am I interested in this? It's because I've identified a real problem. There is real suffering. And I'm looking for a way to help sustainably so I don't just burn out, a way to help authentically so I'm not just pretending, right? But we're looking for a way to help. And it's not that everybody needs to have a little drop of this. Everybody needs to drink tea. Everybody needs to eat soup. Everybody needs to go walk and wiggle their human miracle, the body. That's what's missing from my point of view. And just having taught herbalism and lived in community with herbalists for a long time now, I see it work. I see it work. That's what I want to bring.
Wow. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. And I love that you just pointed that out, that there's kind of this self-improvement project.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm probably the first to admit that I've been on a self-improvement project for, my whole life, and still feel like I am. But yeah, to see it as like, is it just so I have a, optimized life or a better life or a happier life? But we're all interconnected, and it's all relational. Which I think, you and I have talked about that a bunch preparing for this program, that it's this relationship. You mentioned the word bridge. Actually, I'd love you to talk about this a little more, because I think you mentioned this a few times about it's the human body and then the plants, whether they're the entheogenic sacred plants, the psilocybin, or other plants, but this bridge. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Because, of course, I think a lot of us are aware of that, but then it doesn't seem to be in the mainstream psychedelic culture conversation.
Yeah. Well, you remember the idea of the gateway drug? That was Nancy Reagan. Yes. That's her.
Oh my God, is she the one that came up with that?
Yeah, I think it was her time. Yeah. Just say gnosis.
Yeah, just say no.
Gnosis. Right? But the idea, so I used to work in herb shops, that's part of my work has been in, after studying herbs, you go and you offer them in shops, and I had my office in the back of a shop. I worked retail herbal shops in Brooklyn, and there's a thing that happens, which someone leans into the door every day when you work in an herb shop, and they look at the plants. Maybe this has changed with the legalization of deer cannabis. Weird thing that's happened with that. But people would open the door and they would lean in and be like, all these plants get you high? All these plants get you high? Every day you'd get that question at least once. And, I just watched everybody say, no, it's not those plants. Or like, try being an herbalist. I mean, again, it's changing with the legalization of cannabis. But, you say to someone, on a bus, what do you do? Well, I'm an herbalist. Oh, you're an herbalist. Oh, uh-huh. Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah. And you're like, no. All the plants. But this idea of gateway plants, there are certain plants that are so seductive and so interesting, and they're interesting for a really good reason. They cause wonder, and wonder is what creates interest. Wonder is what we're excited about. And so these plants are gateway plants to other plants. Plants that are also, because I used to say to everybody, yes, these plants all get you high. Come on in. Let me show you around. You see this one over here, this lemon balm, that's going to get you high in a very particular way. Let's talk about that. Oh, over here we have a wonderful plant. This is sarsaparilla, It's going to get you high in a very particular way because it's curious. It gets us interested. That's at the bigger level of like, my work is really trying to bring people to the fullness of what this living world has to share, but also bridging us into our bodies. So if we have a plant that takes us out of anxiety, we could get into the habit of thinking like, oh, it's that plant that did it. And it must be some constituent in there, some molecule that hit some receptor site and whoop-de-dee, now I'm like not so anxious. But what if our body responded to the teaching of that plant? What if, for example, that plant grows in the world? For example, there's a plant that I love. It's called calamus. Calamus was sacred all over the world. It's circumpolar. It goes, there's sacred tradition in China for calamus, sacred tradition in India, sacred tradition in the Levant or the Near East, which is west of us. And strange thing. Sacred in Europe, sacred in the Americas. And calamus was especially sacred to Walt Whitman, which I love. The great poet Walt Whitman, he spoke about calamus endlessly. He wrote 36 poems, calamus, and he mentions it in other poems. Calamus grows at the edge of where water has gotten stuck and where it's just starting to flow. Gardeners would say calamus likes to have its feet wet. It has a rhizome, which is like a 90-degree angle that comes down from the flowering plant and then it turns. And that rhizome runs perpendicular to the flowering plant along the ground and then has little rootlets that come down. And it likes to stick itself. It likes to grow. It likes to live right at the edge of where things are just getting clear from being stagnant. And traditionally, old timers used to use it to see that the water was clear. If it was growing, calamus was growing, right at the edge of where the calamus is growing, the water's probably running really clear. Now, if we take calamus and we suddenly feel a clarity in our mind, if we're someone who tends to get boggy and heavy after we eat, someone who has to take a nap after we eat a lot of carbohydrates, or if we think of like a Thanksgiving meal or, everybody crashes down afterwards. If we're someone who experiences that, or maybe we limit food during the day or we fast during the day because it takes all of our energy out of our mind and we feel sort of brain fog. We could take calamus and we'd finally feel like upright and bright and vivid and really sort of engaged. And we could think, okay, what's the chemistry in calamus? But what if calamus is actually someone who lives in that environment? Another being on this living planet, involved in the process. And calamus is actually teaching us, hey, I've been there on the edge of boggy and clear. And I have these strong aromatics, and that's how I can kind of clear the space, kind of breathe deeply, can kind of see the world anew and scrub, and now I'm fresh. What if it's not a chemical only? I admit the chemicals. What if that plant is teaching us? What we can learn is to see that our body changed, and we did that. We did that. We can do that change again. And then we don't need the plant after a time. Because we've learned, yes, my heart was racing. I took a plant and I took a couple breaths and I looked at a distance and I yawned and I relaxed. All these physiological things happened. I can do other things to bring in that physiology so I can come out on my own. I don't need to take the body of another being anymore because I got the teaching. That's the bridging I'm talking about. That's what I'm interested in is connecting us enough so that we can do it easily, naturally. And then we can see all these plants and we can respect them for who they are, knowing that they all have that teaching and we have teaching.
Beautiful. Oh, I love this. And I'm going to start taking some calamus I have.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with that calamus now because technically, I mean, I guess on this podcast, we're not so concerned about all of the laws, but technically we are concerned about them, but we have respect for them. Calamus has a constituent called beta-acerone. It's not that interesting as a constituent that in large amounts would be a problem for your liver.
Oh, wow.
Now, this isn't going to slow down literally all of the ancestors all over the world who've used calamus who had access to it. But if you read online about calamus, you'll see that, oh my gosh, if you take beta-acerone, you're gonna have problems with your liver. And so you'll feel a lot of people won't sell it. A lot of the shops are afraid that, the FDA is going to shut them down or something like this. And it's a good concern. It's not actual. It's not actually, you couldn't eat enough calamus to get enough beta-acerone to be concerned. You really can't. And actually the calamus that is here, just to say a quick thing, it's nice to be able to talk about a plant real quick. But the calamus that's here in these United States, Old Turtle Island, the genetics of that calamus show that it was brought across a land bridge, not the only way that people came, for sure, but across a land bridge from Siberia. It has the same phenotype, same genetics. And that is the one that has the least beta-acerone. Well, and there's 12 different species in China and up in Siberia. Our ancestors picked the one that was the safest and the most effective to bring into Turtle Island. So it's interesting, like when we think, like, this is what I was getting to about the science, when we get to our ancestors and people have been using this herb for 15, 16,000 years that we can document, and they've been okay, and they've benefited, and they've done nothing but praise it and sing magic songs and write hymns and poems to it. And then we get the science, which is brand spanking new, and it's like, oh no, beware, this could cause this problem. We want to be reflective, and we want to take information from the science, but we want to just weigh it, we want to balance it with the tradition. So I just put that caution because I've spoken about a plant that, if someone was to do research, they might find, uh-oh. And I guess I would refer people, there's a great article by a wonderful herbalist from Michigan named Jim McDonald. And if someone wanted to read more about calamus, searching up his website, which name escapes me at the moment, but Jim McDonald calamus typed into your favorite search bar will return a fine article about the concern of the constituent and why it's not so much a concern.
Amazing. Oh my God. I love it. So speaking of Turtle Island and ancestors and, traditions. So something transparently that I said to Sam, I said, Sam, we're probably going to get some pushback because I've actually heard two former clients say this to me over the years. 2 out of hundreds, by the way, say something about, well, I don't want to learn from a white person.
Yeah.
Which of course I'm like, well, I am your coach, so there's that just to start. But I get it when it comes to the psychedelic tradition, especially, this course that we're teaching, this live training is centered around psilocybin, which, a lot of people will pinpoint to being, having roots only in a certain part of Mexico. And there's historical evidence of sacred mushrooms being used all around the world. But, there's a lot of this kind of recent, I would call it recent, or like a recent narrative around whose tradition owns the work with psilocybin mushrooms or, who's allowed to use these. I mean, when we won't even get into ayahuasca or any other of the sacred medicines, but psilocybin in general. Yeah, let's talk to this for a second, because it is something that's come up and it's very sensitive. Of course, I think both of us have great respect for our teachers, our traditions, the ancestors, the indigenous ways. But then, yeah, why should anybody take this training if we're the ones hosting it?
Yeah, no, it's an important question, and I really welcome it, and I'm glad that we can have this conversation, and it can be a real conversation instead of just some words that are sound bites. Yeah. I guess I have a lot to say, but if someone feels that strongly that they don't want to learn these things from a person with a white face, I absolutely respect you, and go find some teachers. Please don't let this put you off from learning it. That's the thing. But a lot of my thinking of this really comes from being a Buddhist and being a Buddhist practitioner in this place. This question used to be kind of common in Buddhist circles a while back. But you're from New Jersey, dude. what are you doing as a Zen practitioner? Like, isn't that from Japan? And it's like, no, it's actually not from Japan. It's from China. Oh, but you're not Chinese. Oh, yeah, I know. Well, but it's moved. And it's moved and it's changed because these medicines, I consider meditation. Notice that root again. Meditation, medicine. Just to say this real quick. Med means in the middle, like Mediterranean. Those people think they're in the middle of the world. That's why they named their big old pond there the Mediterranean. And that's the problem when people think they're in the middle of the world. But that meditation, medicine, what med means is to bring back to the center, to bring balance. And so for something like Buddha Dharma, the teachings that I live with, that's moved from India up across the Silk Roads, through Pakistan, through Afghanistan, through Indonesia, up through China, up through Korea, into Japan, over, around, and into America. It's moved because it's needed, and it's adapted to the cultures it's arrived at. And one of my great heroes is a Zen practitioner from Japan who came in the beginning part of the 1900s, and his name is Nyogen Senzaki. Senzaki, by the way, was arrested, as he said in a poem, for the crime of my Japanese face. For the crime of my Japanese face, he was rounded up in the original concentration camps that happened here on Turtle Island for Japanese people during World War II. And he was interred up at Heart Mountain in Wyoming. They put all the Japanese in a prison camp there and made them wait out the war, not knowing what was going to happen. And I love this man because he carved a little Buddha out of his soap in the prison, and he set up his altar, and he led everybody in Zen meditation every day, did their practice, and he wrote about it in the most beautiful Japanese poetry. And Nyogen Senzaki was asked about his work of bringing the Dharma to the United States. And he said, it's like holding a lotus to the rock. I'm going to keep holding the lotus until there's enough dirt for it to take hold. And what I want people to understand from my point of view is that I'm not walking away from the tradition. I'm trying to build dirt. I'm trying to root us in something real. The inauthentic nature of some ways that people can sort of appropriate and grab at cultures that they don't really understand and they don't really want to look into. It's repugnant. It's ugly. It bothers us all if we're being honest. It's got a stench, and we smell it, and we want to clear the air. But the solution going forward, as far as I can see, what I can do in this body is I can build some dirt, and I can let the teachings flourish here. Now, specifically with psilocybin, I would say, to echo what you shared, these mushrooms are not in one place. These mushrooms are all over the world. We have evidence, and they're from all over the world. People who look all sorts of ways have used mushrooms. But I do want to honor especially what you mentioned about the Mazatec people of Mexico and Huatla. And, I learned a lot about that tradition because, I had a background in poetry. And I before I knew about, everybody will talk about Maria Sabina, bless Maria Sabina. I was studying poetry for a time with a great poet who shared translations of her poetry, of what she would speak during the work that she did. And Jerome Rothenberg is his name. He just died. Just to speak Jerome's name, Jerome was a legend, and he had a wonderful volume called Technicians of the Sacred from the 70s, where they were really celebrating indigenous poetry and translating it and putting it into English. And it just drew me, and especially Maria Sabina, before I ever understood that she was connected to this tradition. And I've also learned a lot about Maria Sabina and other people from that lineage or that tradition from Huatla to Jimenez in Mexico through Kathleen Harrison, great teacher, great herbalist. Kathleen is an herbalist. We call her Kat Harrison, an herbalist. And just, I've had the opportunity to meet and talk with her a few times and just deeply respect Kat and learn so much from her. And she shared recently that underground in Huatla is one of the biggest cave networks in the world. And so what happened is that tradition literally went underground. It's how it avoided the conquest. And so we owe an incredible debt. We all of us owe an incredible debt to the people who survived, but not just hiding. They brought the tradition and they kept it alive like an ember in the night through countless generations so that it could flourish again. And we're all in their debt. And so we got to knock our heads on the ground and bow deep to those folks. And we have to keep going. It's not an either or. It's not an either or. We have to keep holding that lotus to the rock until there's enough dirt that our culture can get on with it. It's time. It's time. And so, yeah, I'm available for that conversation. I love that conversation about who we're learning from. We're learning from the plants. We're learning from the teachers and from the grannies.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it.
The witchy grannies. I mean, then there's also, because this has come up so much, I remember the first person who ever had something happen was our friend East Forest in 2019. I remember had some criticism, and I was like, well, but the reality is, here we are on Turtle Island, Westerners, with a lot of people with, there's lots of mixed races and mixed skin colors inside of the circles that we attend and communities that we're a part of. But the reality is it's happening everywhere. As someone who's been on the front lines, sometimes I'm actually utterly shocked where ayahuasca has gone across this planet. I mean, pretty much everywhere, like Northern Scandinavia, like Japan, Australia. I mean, so far, the only place I say I'm not sure it's been is North Korea. Maybe, who knows, maybe Iran or something. But there is a reality to who's already working with these medicines, especially here. The bulk of my audience is located in the United States and Canada and, some in Europe and Australia. But the reality is there's so many people out there working with these sacred mushrooms, giving them to their clients, holding spaces for others, holding sessions for people and, like doing it as they're living, which, in the end, when I interviewed Rick Doblin last year, there was this big kind of, I'm sure you heard about it, and if not, I'll send it to you. There was a controversy at the end of Psychedelic Science, the big psychedelic conference that took place last summer where it was, 13,000 people. Someone got on stage, stormed the stage and talked about indigenous, like what do the indigenous people play a part in this larger conversation? And thank God they did it. It was a lot of discussion. But when I interviewed Rick a month and a half, and asked him about it, he said, we have to really focus on the larger picture. And on some level, I do agree. The larger picture of the greater healing of humanity. Like what is happening on Earth right now. Look at the world that we're in. We cannot deny that we're going through like a huge transition. And there's a lot of intense energies right now, especially here in the US. Like, I mean, it doesn't even matter what side you're on. It's just intense. There's a lot of fast, rapid change happening. And, I think a lot of people are struggling. There's a lot of suffering out there in general. And these teacher plants, these master plants, like you said, it's like learning about yourself, learning about your body for yourself and the greater community. So there's some piece of this that I've always kept my focus on. Well, which is better, like keeping the mushrooms only in the Mazatec region of Mexico and not letting anybody else touch them, or providing maybe a new life for someone or healing for communities and the planet? I'm curious, like, what are your views on that? Like this kind of the greater scheme of like why psychedelics are so popular right now, why there's everybody and their mother has mushrooms. They're selling mushrooms at the farmers market in New York City, by the way. It's like they're just people. It's practically legal, even though we know it's not. It's out there, and so it's kind of like what is it? Eisenstein has said. What is it? The healing seeks the medicine. I mean, I can't remember his exact quote, but it's like, the sick people, the suffering are seeking the medicine, and the demand is there for a reason, Yeah. Any views on this?
That's interesting. I don't know what the quote you're talking about, but it reminds me of a Zen koan. We have a koan in the Zen tradition. Koans are magical folklore. They're the folklore of the Chinese ancestors of the Zen tradition, and they contain teaching. And there are a lot of confusions about them, but they're beautiful, and they're medicine stories in a way that you can learn and carry with you. But there's one.
I looked it up. By the way, I looked it up. The illness seeks the medicine, and the medicine seeks the illness.
Yeah.
The illness seeks the medicine.
Yeah, there's a koan very similar. Master Yunmen, 9th century Chinese epic teacher, he said, medicine and disease complete each other. Right? It's similar, and it's true. But to speak to what you're saying, I mean, I think you're sharing something really important. And it's funny you say, I used to work at the farmer's market in New York City. I used to sell stuff at the farmer's market, and there were mushrooms available then too. We were just, that was happening on the sly, I believe.
All those years.
I've had a lot of jobs. That's funny. But yeah, farmers markets are a good place to work and meet people and eat good food. But specifically about the indigenous, I think we all need to really be clear. We need to not just care about people for their powerful medicines and their cool costumes and their culture that it would be really interesting to borrow. We need to actually really, really, really look at those people as individual people who need support. And if they need support, how are we going to show up in a real way? It's practical, on the ground, everyday humanity, compassion. It's one of the things that really I know from my conversations with folks that really sort of hurts is people will steal outright your tradition and not give a damn about you as a person. Not care if you had dinner that night or if you have enough firewood to get through the winter because you gave the magical medicine teaching and off they go. And we just need to be really humble and grateful for all of the people who travel this path simply, humbly, and make sure everybody gets enough to eat and make sure everybody gets enough to keep warm. That's the basic stuff, to make sure everybody gets the respect of having their heart met with resonance and openness and not some preconceived ideas, even if that idea is like, well, you must be a secret wise person with your tradition there. Let me grab some of that and leave you alone, and off I go. And that, I think, is the main thing that I really want to make sure we talk about it. And within the bigger picture of the world and focusing on the healing of the world, why is the world demanding this? Is because the world is profoundly broken. The world is at a place where people have lost the plot. And no one really wants to hear the answer is too simple. It's too simple. Money doesn't grow on trees. Food does. Right? Get your hands in the dirt. Get your beehives going. Find your friends and sing. The great poet Gary Snyder, he pointed out one time that when he studied anthropology, they would say that you would identify a tribe of people in anthropology. This is probably long ago in the 50s, earlier than that, maybe in the 30s when he was studying it. He said you would identify a tribe of people by the songs they knew in common. So if you had a group of people who all knew all the words to that old number and they all sang along, it's like, oh, you've got a community, you've got like a tribe there. Find your tribe, find the people whose songs you sing in common. I look around our world some days and I think it's going to be Happy Birthday for this crew. Like that's the only song everybody in this room probably knows together. Yikes, right?
Not us.
Well, we got a few songs that we all sing together, and that's saving my life day to day is to know it's not out there. It's in our homes. It's in our communities. And yeah, staying up all night every now and again, with some teaching plants and singing the songs that we all sing together, that's profoundly healing. And the world is craving it. So if you're in a position like so many people that you're sharing this wonderful work with are in the position to share that and build it out, try not to be someone special. Oh, I'm the one who did the training. I'm the one who did the work to be sitting at the altar. Everybody sits at the altar when they eat their dinner. Hopefully everybody gets a dinner, right? And like, that's where we got to work. Where have our songs gone? Where are people saying our blessings before our meals? Not everybody needs psychedelics. Everybody needs to say thanks before they eat someone else's body, which is what we do when we eat, you know?
Sam, I love this. I love this conversation. So fun, so uplifting, and I'm so excited for this program that we're teaching. I hope everybody will consider joining it. We're going to have the links, hopefully, by the time this is published. And if not, then be sure to join my email list, because that's one of the best ways to get to know what's coming up next and when this is launching. But I'm going to share a little bit about, where people can find you if they want to find you outside of this particular interview or outside of our particular Energetics of Psilocybin program, which is launching, we think in March. I think it'll be March 2025. And then hopefully it's a fun success, and we'll launch it again maybe later next year, or who knows. But I will say to anybody that's on the fence about join this first time. It's always the best to join the first time. And by the way, I always say the price always goes up. So join now. I'm really excited. This is like a dream come true, and it's just beautiful how it completely came together and manifested. But you can also find Sam at Arbor Vitae Herbal School. We'll put the links in here. And I think you even have a website. Maybe we'll link that. But Sam, any parting words you want to give to the listeners and talk about the Energetics of Psilocybin training that we have coming up?
Yeah, I would just say quickly about the contacting me. I'm someone who, to this point, has avoided social media. I don't have a Facebook or an Insta, whatever's. I don't do any of that because I do other things. But I would like people to be able to get in touch if they have questions, if they're interested in this. I really hope people will come to this program. This is going to be really useful. We're bringing some real important and practical tools that I think will help, especially this community. And Beth mentioned Arbor Vitae School of Traditional Herbalism. That's where I'm a core faculty, and I teach. That's a 3-year herbal training program, and that's a great place to look for information, and a great place to contact us as herbalists. But also, we're going to have a bunch of workshops coming up in the summer that are available for people who aren't enrolled in the program. And I would also say I have 3 great retreats coming up at Ravencrest Botanicals, which is a beautiful, beautiful herbal farm in the mountains of New York and the Helderberg Mountains. Between the Catskills and the Adirondacks, we got the Helderberg Escarpment. And we're going to be we're going to have a silent meditation retreat in July, Liberation Day, July 3rd to 7th. And we're going to have 2 wonderful retreats. I'm teaching together with Susanna Raven, a wonderful herbalist and a mentor of mine and a dear friend. And we're going to do green relations, how to wake into the living world in the garden. And we're doing a program on skincare, skin deep, and how we can heal the skin inside and out. So there's just some places to reach me, because I know I'm not available in the other ways. But I really do hope that that people are inspired to look more at their practice of offering these sacred medicines, and always be ready to grow and ready to bring something new, something deeper, something that will let the folks who are depending on you and relying on your guidance to feel more held and more equipped to enter the world as they go back to their lives. And I really, I hope we get a good turnout, because my interest is to spread this information. And I'm so grateful for you, Beth, for for inviting me to do this and just always being such an ally and an encourager. And we're grateful for you. We're very grateful for you. And yeah, this was fun.
You.
Hopefully,
I am so excited.
Entertaining.
So excited. And I agree. I'm like, oh, I was like, why doesn't everybody know this? Why don't I know this? I mean, it's almost like, after 30 years, I'm like, oh, you think you know things. And then you're just like, it's a whole new world to open up with you. So I'm so excited for everybody to really, get to listen to grandma's wisdom and carry it out into the world and really, hold better, safer, and more deep spaces for themselves and their clients. So, yeah. And please reach out to either one of us or me if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer it. And yeah, we'll take it from here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.